The thing with yodeling, it's really hard to do and it's really hard to pitch. To do it and actually get the pitch right so that it sounds right is really hard. And there's not many people can do it. And Thijs just found he tried it. He'd never yodeled before in his life. He tried it just to try an
Wow.
idea and found he could do it and he could pitch it. And there's loads of reaction videos of people listening to Hocus Pocus. Everybody goes, how is he doing that?
Right.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. Before we get started, a big thanks to James Campion for having me on his 300 Favorite Albums podcast to talk about Van Halen's 1984 album. I'm a loyal subscriber to the show. It's fantastic. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'm also a fan of Sonic Bond Books On Track series. And today we cover another in that series. Stephen Lambe is back on the show. His latest book from the On Track series is titled Focus 1969 to 1985. Welcome back, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you for having me. As always, Eric, great to be here.
So tell us what drew you to tell the story of Focus.
As you know, I've spoken on this show about Yes before. And when I was growing up in the 70s, because I'm old, my two favorite bands from that era were Yes and Focus. I couldn't really tell you why I connected with those two bands so much back in the, well, I could probably guess. But so in parallel, those are the two bands that I love the most. And those are the two bands that I've kind of developed most expertise about over the years. Yeah, it seemed like a no-brainer to do a book about them. They are very different to Yes in that, I mean, Yes are about to drop a new album, Aurora, in June, whereas Focus, oh, I can talk about a little bit about that at some point if you want, but Focus, they exist now as a band, but they haven't existed in the form that I was writing about since 1976, really, with a few muttering since, but so there is a band called Focus that exists right now, but they are not the band that was formed by Jan Akkerman and Thijs van Leer. They are Thijs van Leer's band essentially now.
During their peak years, what made them stand out? Because it was a crowded early 70s progressive rock scene. What made them stand out in your opinion?
Well, a couple of things. One is nobody sounded like them since. They are almost a dead end in progressive rock or in rock generally, because the combination of what they were doing obviously with the rock influences, but with also the classical influence and the jazz influence, combine those with also this big thing for improvisation, and nobody sounded like them since. I mean, some of it comes from them being Dutch, if you listen to some of the other Dutch progressive rock bands, they are of a type, not of a type. They are, they sound completely different to the whole English progressive rock movement that then led into the American progressive rock movement. But nobody sounds like Focus, and so I think, and also well, a couple of other very specific things. They were largely instrumental, but with a very strong sense of melody, and most of the other bands had a proper lead singer. And then you got with Focus, you got some gimmicks. Thijs van Leer's yodeling is one particular thing which he didn't know he could do before he tried doing it. So the song that everybody knows by them is Hocus Pocus. Even if you've never heard of Focus and you don't know of a song called Hocus Pocus, you have heard Hocus Pocus somewhere, because it's ubiquitous to this day. It's used as things like they used it during one of the Olympic Games as a theme. It's still used all over the place. So you will have heard Hocus Pocus.
I remember there was a guitarist that covered it. First time I ever heard the song was the version by a guitarist who covered it was it Gary Hoey? He covered it in the 80s.
Oh, right. Did he?
It
Wow.
was, yes, it was on FM rock radio at the time.
I did not know that. But then again, is he American? If he was
Gary Hoey, let's see. I believe he is. Oh, yeah. He's from Massachusetts.
Okay.
Lowell, Massachusetts. So he's from the U.S.
The thing that makes that song famous, apart from the fact that it's bonkers, really, because it's got a structure like nothing else. It's got Thijs van Leer's yodeling, but also it's got a really famous riff, a really famous hard rock riff. It's one of those riffs that guitarists learn how to play when they start playing the guitar. That and Smoke on the Water.
Right.
So that would be probably one of the reasons why it has been covered. But it stands out. Nothing has ever sounded like it. In fact, in the book, I break it down, not from a musicologist's point of view, but into this is what you're hearing now. This is what you're hearing now. So this is a riff. This is a drum solo. This is a recapitulation of the riff. This is another bit of yodeling, and this is Thijs van Leer. He's whistling now.
Yeah, I love the breakdown. By the way, it was 1993. Gary Hoey's.
Okay.
It was the 80s,
Okay.
but boy, yeah, 1993. You describe creativity in bands as coming from both harmony and conflict. So let's talk about that now, because that dynamic really shaped the sound of Focus, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict in Focus, but somehow they were together from 69 until the early 76, those two guys. So we're talking about specifically between Thijs van Leer and Jan Akkerman. So they managed to stay together for 6-7 years, and they never really got along. I think partly because Jan Akkerman was very much an improvisation absolutist, so he never played anything the same. So almost grudgingly, he might play, the riff to Hocus Pocus, but he wanted to improvise all the time, because he came from that sort of, not jazz, but a jazz ethic, if you understand what I mean. Thijs came from a much more classical background, so his main influence is Bach, and although he also had that jazz leaning as well, so he was fine with improvising, but also he knew that most of your audience, they want to hear the same stuff night after night with maybe a little bit of variation. So there was that conflict. There was a personality conflict, and if you see videos of Focus as we go through the early to mid 70s, you see they get further and further apart on stage. So even by 1972, 73, they refused to be in the same room when they were recording. So there's famous Chipping Norton sessions, which is it's a little town in Oxfordshire, or is it in Gloucestershire? Doesn't matter. In the west of England, and they went to record at Mike Vernon's studio in Chipping Norton, and basically Jan Akkerman stayed in his hotel room and wouldn't come out until nighttime when the rest of the band had left, and then he recorded his parts. Then it's very angsty. They didn't create an album from those sessions. Some of it later appeared in other things, but nonetheless put them together, and the music they actually did create almost by accident sometimes is a thing of beauty, and so my theory has always been that I was asked by I'm going to sidetrack slightly for a second, a little advert, I guess. I was asked to be involved in a documentary about Focus for Dutch television, which is available on YouTube now. And the guys doing the documentary were trying to get me to say that Thijs van Leer was a genius. I wouldn't say that, because I think together with Jan Akkerman as a duo, they are a genius between them, but separately, the sum of the parts isn't quite what it should be. So they've never repeated the quality of music separately that they did as Focus. So amazing. But I think some of the conflict between them produced that quality of music. I think they were competing with each other a lot of the time. So and that just raises the bar slightly and just increases the quality of music they produce.
I always wondered in those circumstances, because that happens a lot. You get the two bandmates who write songs together who just can't stand each other. Do they when they have this magic happen and they have music that is so successful commercially and there's the demand, do they resent that? Do they embrace that? Hey, great, our music's taken off. Or are they like, oh man, I got to keep working with them? Or is it both?
People are human. People are human, and I'm getting on in years now, and I've realized that that you expect people, once they get into their 40s and 50s and 60s, or even that they will mellow, and sometimes they just don't. They carry on hating each other,
right?
and they carry on being children. And I think I think sometimes you get people who are very mature and can deal with these things, and then you get, particularly, if you're focused and you're like you're in your late 20s, maybe mid to late 20s, and you're not really used to the level of success. That can be difficult. I mean, they never took drugs, but there was conflict between, throughout the band, and I think sometimes you just don't deal with it very well. Very occasionally you'll get someone who's really level-headed and can deal with it all. But I would say, look at all the bands, look at the Rolling Stones, look at the Beatles.
I was about to say that I just watched the video of the Stones out there getting interviewed by the AP for their new upcoming album, and Mick and Keith are a good example of that. They found a way to make it work. Because they knew, because I mean, the music is like it's like a divorce, but they have this beautiful child or children together. So you're forever linked. You're going to have to deal with each other.
You still get some situations where I'm going to try and think of an example where some of the band members have remained the best of friends throughout the years, but more often it's grudging tolerance of each other rather than mutual love. I'm sure an example of mutual love will drop into my head eventually.
I think Genesis is a good example. Genesis,
yeah. Oh, you see, there's a bit like that in Pink Floyd as well, because they're English and they're gentlemen, so they hate conflict, and they hate clashing with each other. So it all becomes very passive aggressive. That definitely happened in Genesis, definitely happened in Pink Floyd. Now there's more resentment in Pink Floyd than there was, but obviously
Genesis guys, the threesome there seem to be best friends.
Yeah, no, it's a question of it's are we adults about this, and do we put any differences to one side, and do we try and produce something that's greater than our individual people? I think Genesis managed to do that. Probably as a 3-piece, better than as a 5 or 4-piece, right. I would imagine. But regardless of whether you like the music or not, of course.
Let's go back to the beginning. How did they come together? What's the origin story of Focus?
Jan was successful earlier than Thijs. So Jan was in some sort of mid-60s beat bands, but then he was in a very successful Dutch band called Brainbox. With Pierre van der Linden, who became the drummer in Focus, and is the drummer in Focus right now as well. Thijs van Leer, on the other hand, came into music via the classics, but then got himself in a band called with a guy called Ramses Shaffi, sort of kind of a cabaret thing called Ramses Shaffi. But they kind of got together a little bit with Jan as a session musician then, but then they, as a 4-piece, so this is the original lineup of Focus, which is Jan Akkerman, Thijs van Leer, sort of keyboards and flute, Jan Akkerman on guitar, Hans Kluver on drums, and Martin Dresden on bass. God, I hope I got that the right way around. And they become the house band for a Dutch production of Hair, the musical. Gradually, and then eventually they escape from doing this. They can rehearse. I think Hair is, they have a Monday off from doing Hair. This is 1969, so they have a Monday off from doing Hair. They're able to rehearse, and then gradually they emerge as their own band, instrumental band, but playing kind of covers of classical pieces, some jazz pieces, and just gradually start developing their own music. And then in 1969, they're allowed to make their first album, which happens in London, which is called, something's called Focus One, and something's called Focus Play Focus. Something's called In and Out of Focus. It's got lots of different versions. And it's a bit like the first Genesis album. It's been released constantly. So they make that album, and it's not a great success. And then they, cut a very long story short, they record this song called, an instrumental called House of the King. which is a mixture of a sort of flute theme played by Thijs and sort of guitar theme played by Jan, and it's a huge hit in Holland. And it's one of those other songs that people will have heard, even if you don't know it's by Focus. Maybe not so much in the USA, but it was, for instance, they used it as a theme for kids' TV programs in the UK. I remember in the 70s. So that then leads into. However, there is a significant lineup change. Jan gets already in 1970 gets fed up of playing with these musicians who he feels are don't sue me, Jan. He probably feels that are beneath him, not Thijs, but the other two. So he leaves because he wants to go back and play with Pierre van der Linden, who's a very, very strong musician, very unusual style of drummer, very jazz orientated. So and then there's management shenanigans, and somebody says to Thijs, okay, well, you can either carry on with these two guys you got now, or you can stay with Jan and become a much bigger band. So that's what he does. He says, okay, we're going to reform Focus, but without the rhythm section, we're going to get a new rhythm section. So that then leads into the kind of a version of the classic lineup of Focus, and then they're kind of set, really. So that's as far as so I'll take it up to there. So we're talking about 1970, 71. Focus are now an established band. It's really a question of what they do next, really.
Established, yet that debut album still feels like, and that's from 1970, still feels like a band searching. I guess the Anonymous would be the track that seems to point towards their future direction.
Yes, and the Focus the instrumental track as well. Although there's a vocal version of that on the album as well. It's almost like they're being pushed into recording songs, which is not really their strong suit. They don't really have a very strong lead vocalist, and also there is a song on that album that's about Cuba. The title of which I've completely forgotten. It's about Cuba. And that's left off the American version because of the American-Cuba sort of tensions.
Right, at that time.
So before I started researching the first version of this book, I had never heard it because I've got the American version of that album on vinyl, and I'd never heard that. Also, it's not brilliantly well recorded, but there are signs of what's to come. And House of the King, I think, because they record that a little bit later, is they think, okay, well, we do instrumental music. Clearly, that's what people want. So they become an instrumental band. They hired in 1970, 71, they hired a bass player called Cyril Havermans, because I think at that point he was going to be the lead vocalist, because he was a singer-songwriter rather than the bass player. So let's shoehorn him into the band. And he's the bass player on the next album, which is Focus 2 / Moving Waves, depending upon where you bought it, which to this day, I still think is their finest album.
Sugar Island, right? That's the song.
Sugar Island, that's the song.
References Cuba.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound like Focus at all. It's like this weird calypso thing.
What do we know about how the track House of the King was written and recorded? Came together quickly, right?
It was recorded quickly, in secret, I think, because their manager kind of didn't want them to go back into the studio. I'm trying to remember exactly what the circumstances were, but it was recorded individually as a single to maybe tag onto the album. So some versions of that first album have House of the King, which was recorded 6 months later, tagged onto it, but its main success was as a single. I think it was one of those ones where they wanted to go back into the studio. For some reason, the management weren't too excited about them doing that, but they did it in secret anyway. And then when the management heard it, they thought, oh yeah, this is a hit. Amazing that a 2-minute instrumental people should hear it and think, yeah, that's a hit. That's the 70s for you, because that wouldn't happen now. Definitely not. So there's nothing terribly controversial about it. It was just recorded as a one-off. And in fact, because it didn't make some versions of that first album, some reissues of the first album have it on it. It doesn't appear on an album in the UK until Focus 3, which was released much later in 1972. So it kind of stands alone. But that was what put them on the path of saying, okay, we're definitely doing instrumental music. That's all we're going to do now.
Moving Waves, 1971, you call that a near perfect album, and that does feature Hocus Pocus on there. Before I ask you about that specific track, what elevates that album above their other work?
First of all, the material is terrific. There's only one song that stands apart, really, and that's the title track, Moving Waves, which is a vocal thing. Which doesn't quite sound like it belongs on the album, but it's 2.5 minutes long. No one's going to complain about that. It's got Hocus Pocus. It's got a couple of much less sung instrumental pieces that are beautiful. Le Clochard and Yanis. And also it has what I believe is Focus's finest moment, which is Focus 2, which is, I'm sure I say that in the book, which is a sublime 4.5 minutes. I think Focus realized that that's very strong as well, because they play it live to this day, and they play an immaculate version of it as well. A note perfect version of it to this day. However, side 2, you've got the side long piece Eruption, which now Focus have done quite a few long form pieces, but Eruption works brilliantly because of Mike Vernon, the producer's work, because he edited down what they were playing into something that was really palatable as a 20-minute piece, whereas kind of left to their own devices, this happens a lot in rock. So you do an album that has a lot of input from the producer, because he's almost teaching the band how to do stuff, and then they get overconfident, and when we talk about Focus 3, that's a major factor. I think they get overconfident and they assert their own power and they do whatever they want. With Eruption, he kind of shoehorns some themes and some improvisation into this brilliant 20-minute piece, and it works superbly well. And it's a sidelong piece in 1971. Yes did Close to the Edge in 1972. Genesis did Supper's Ready, 1972, was it 73? So they're not first band to do a sidelong piece. I think Floyd had already done Echoes at that point, but they're doing this kind of stuff almost before anybody else is. And Eruption is a near perfectly structured piece of music. Over 20 minutes. It even has a drum solo that really works as part of the whole. I'm not a big fan of drum solos in studio albums, but here it works as an atmospheric thing. So Eruption's perfect, but I think it's the strength of the material and the restraint with which they play it. I think the influence of the producer that really makes it the sort of perfect encapsulation, that's the right word, of where they were at the time.
Stephen Lambe, the author of Focus, 1969 to 1985, part of the Sonic Bond on-track series. So let's get to Hocus Pocus, number 20 in the UK, number 9 single in the US, and at its core, built on an unforgettable riff. How did that idea evolve into something that was so wildly unconventional?
Well, I think they're just sort of band that kind of did that thing in the studio. They just the way Queen developed Bohemian Rhapsody. It's just not layer upon layer upon layer, but it's idea upon idea upon idea upon idea, and they just throw it all together, based around. If you look at the structure of it, which I do, it's based around that riff, and some soloing, but with something else between each of the reiterations of the riff. So the interesting thing is that if you listen to the album, it's a 6-minute version. It was re-recorded to be an American single, and that's the version that did so well in the USA. that version is faster and shorter. So some of the slightly madcap ideas that are in the 6-minute version are kind of missing in the version that was a hit in America. But anybody can hear that longer version because it's on Moving Waves / Focus 2.
But the yodeling remains on both. The yodeling.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's almost the hook.
Yeah.
That and the riff of the hook.
How did he land on that as a musical choice?
He just tried it, and he realized the thing with yodeling is that it's really hard to do, and it's really hard to pitch. So anybody can start. Well, see, I almost tried to do it then, and anybody can do that. Well, a lot of people can do that voice, but to do it and actually get the pitch right so that it sounds right is really hard. And there's not many people who can do it. And Thijs just found, he tried it. He'd never yodeled before in his life. He tried it just to try an idea and found he could do it and he could pitch it. That's the thing. If people will have seen like reaction videos on YouTube, and there's loads of reaction videos of people listening to Hocus Pocus, because everybody goes, how is he doing that? Right. When I did there's a guy, he will be unknown in the USA, but a guy from the 50s, British musician from the 50s called Frank Highfield, and he yodeled as well. No doubt there will be many people, because yodeling is kind of a thing in folk music in the USA, I know as well.
It is.
But there's a guy, so he had some hits yodeling as well. But it's to actually shoehorn that into a piece of rock music, it's kind of weird.
It is.
It's interesting. It's interesting also that he does try it a bit more. He tries it in. Okay, so this is our gimmick now. So occasionally he tries it again, but without the same success. There's a track on Hamburg Concerto called Harem Scarum, and he does a little bit in that as well, but it doesn't work so well. It was a hit in Holland, actually,
okay,
but it wasn't.
It's like Hocus Pocus, the sequel.
Yeah, kind of. You can see what they're reaching for, but but Hocus Pocus is so wild and so done on, almost feels like it's done on the spur of the moment, that it would be very hard to reproduce. But it's not just about Focus. The important thing with that album is that the other instrumental tracks, Focus 2 particularly, but also the other ones are so strong. And Eruption is such an amazing piece of music in itself as well. Thanks as much as anything to Mike Vernon, the producer. It's nearly perfect. But and also the title track is perfectly listenable. It just doesn't feel like it belongs on the album.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. Was Focus 3 from 72, was that the last album where the band's truly functioning as a cohesive unit?
Probably yes. It's the last album where the band are very happy to go into a studio and jam as a 4-piece. There had been, so on Moving Waves, there's a lot of discussion as to who played the bass on that, whether it was Cyril Havermans or whether it was Jan Akkerman, or a bit of both. And I think Jan lays claim to playing a lot of the bass on that. It's very good, the bass playing on that. By the time we get to Focus 2, they've replaced Cyril with Bert Reuter, who is a really strong musician. He's a virtuoso in his own in his own right, and we'll hopefully talk about the fact how he saved Focus a few years later. So you've now got this cohesive 4-piece with Pierre van der Linden on drums, who is again amazing, still amazing now. And so you've got this really, really cooking sort of improvisational band who can kind of play anything really. And you got Thijs playing keyboards and flute. So so they are properly cooking. They can go into a studio and they can jam. And unfortunately, that's what they do. So Focus 2 has some brilliant stuff, absolutely brilliant. Elspeth of Nottingham is a lovely piece. Around Goes the Gossip is kind of classic Focus, and there's loads of really good bits of Focus on it. There's Focus 3 is a beautiful piece of music, and then they go into a sort of 10-minute improvisation called Answers, Questions, Questions Answered, which is also good because it's relatively concise. However, they decided to make the album a double, and a lot of one side and about, I can't remember, 6 or 7 minutes of the next side is made up of Anonymous too. So not only are they revisiting a song that they've already recorded on the first album, but they're throwing in loads of solos. There's a drum solo, there's a bass solo, and there's some really good playing on it, but it's just a little bit overblown. It's the sort of thing you might want to hear live. I'm not sure. By the way, people will disagree with me. People will say Anonymous 2 is one of the greatest pieces of rock music ever, but in my opinion, it's overblown, basically. So I think it would have been a fantastic single album, but they just get a little bit ahead of themselves and they make it a double.
The song Sylvia is from that album, and along with House of the King and Hocus Pocus, it's one of the most popular songs, but it's a polar opposite of Hocus Pocus. It's melodic. I mean, if somebody only knew Hocus Pocus, would Sylvia completely change their perception of the band?
It would do. I think Sylvia is a lot more representative of what Focus really is. I mean, Hocus Pocus is amazing, but it's not, you could, if you're expecting Focus to sound like that all the time, they don't. Particularly as they're not really a hard rock band. And Hocus Pocus has got hard rock riffing. It's not metal, but it's kind of hard rock riffing, and they're a much more melodic band than that. So Sylvia is based around a lead guitar line, a melodic lead guitar line, basically repeated with a little coda, and structurally it's lovely, and it's a beautiful tune, and it got to number 4, I think, in the UK.
I'm looking at it here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric.
9 in the Netherlands, 4 in the UK, a respectable 89 in the US.
It wasn't a big hit in the USA, was it?
But still made the Hot 100. And
when the band, interestingly, it was so Moving Waves was released in 1971, had a brief chart placing in the USA in the UK, and then fell away again. When Sylvia is a hit, you then have a situation where Sylvia's in the charts, Hocus Pocus is in the UK charts. This is at the same time, pretty much. Moving Waves and Focus 3 are all in the charts at the same time. So they kind of build. People latch onto this Focus phenomenon, and then they start buying everything. And it means, in fact, Moving Waves does a little bit better in the UK charts than Focus 3. I think probably because if you've got to buy one or the other, you're in a record store in 1972, and you've got to buy one or the other. Which one do you buy? Oh, I'll buy the one that's a bit cheaper because it's a single album. I think it may just be that. So then all of a sudden you've got, for a little while, you've almost got Focus mania, particularly in the UK, and to a certain extent in the USA as well. It happened a little bit later in the USA, I think. But they're on Midnight Special in the USA, which has a massive audience at that time. They're on the Old Grey Whistle Test in the UK a couple of times, which also gives them access to a much bigger audience in the UK as well. And from that point onwards, really, they're a big band. They're in the sort of, they're a proper kind of famous rock band in the same strata as the other progressive, there's the Yeses and Genesis and that sort of thing. In fact, they were bigger than Genesis were at that time. So, but not they're in that higher echelon of bands. So it's a question of what they do next, really.
Focus at the Rainbow. That's the next thing, right, from 73.
But that was a stopgap because they failed to because at that point also they are exhausted. So I think they make a mistake in that they go through this period of intense touring, and rather than go home to the Netherlands to recuperate for a few weeks. They go straight into the studio. This is the Chipping Norton thing I was referring to earlier, and they by this time they're not really getting along. They failed to record an album, and the whole process leads to, well, they're still in the same band together, but Jan Akkerman, it's never the same between the two of them. Pierre van der Linden, the drummer, leaves immediately after. In fact, he left almost like a few days after they did the Midnight Special performance in the USA. So he leaves, and then like, what do? You've got this amazing drummer. They just found another drummer essentially, and then the story continues for a while.
Were their live performances tighter or more unpredictable compared to studio albums?
I think at this point, their live performances contain plenty of improvisation, but were relatively predictable. When we get on to talking about the end, there are some tapes, some live shows which are available. They're not like collectors things. You can people can buy them. That show a really strange band that's just kind of playing the hits in a cursory way, and also basically playing sets of improvisation, really. So where the band can't really agree on a set, and so they just improvise. Sorry, this is leaping forward, but they do a tour of Japan in 1975 with Pierre van Linden back in the band. So it's that lineup that recorded Focus 3, and what I've heard of it is it's not an easy listen. There's an attempt at playing Hocus Pocus, but it's 2 minutes long, and then there's just some improvisations that don't kind of gel really. It must have been a strange experience going to see them, but at this point in 1972 they are still cooking. There's Focus at the Rainbow was recorded, I think, in May 1972, and there's on the Focus 50 box set there is a performance also in the UK from about a few months earlier. It's broadly the same set, but they are on fire in that set. Yes, there's improvisation, but they're playing Focus's set, so it's very much it's the improvisation is quite well structured, let's just say.
Well, you answered my question, because I was going to ask, by 73, how is the band functioning creatively under those conditions? But I think you answered it. It's hit or miss.
So they have a go at recording this album in 73, and then Pierre van der Linden leaves. They recruit a British drummer who'd been in a band called Stone the Crows, called Colin Allen, and he's a much more conventional drummer. He doesn't quite suit. He never really suits Jan Akkerman. Whereas Pierre has this kind of very jazzy style, virtuosic. Colin is a much more conventional. He's a fine drummer, but he's a much more conventional rock drummer, which means that when you then listen to Hamburger Concerto, so they do this album, which it's an interesting album in many ways because it is their most symphonic. So this is where they're tapping into the progressive rock world. The influence is starting to feed back into Focus again. So it's the album that sounds most like the Yeses and the Genesis. Thijs is using a much greater palette of keyboard instruments, and it has some really great moments. Harum Scarum, though it's trying to recapture Hocus Pocus, it's still a fine song. And then there's a beautiful track called La Cathedral de Strasbourg, which is probably one of the finest things that Thijs has ever composed, including a Bach theme in it. But they also do this another sidelong piece, which is called Hamburg Concerto, which refers back to eating hamburgers a lot, I think, when touring in the USA.
That's from 74.
Yeah, so that's the album that they then do, and to me, again, to a lot of Focus fans, that's their finest moment. I think they're tapping into the symphonic nature of it.
Right. The classical influences there.
Yeah. There's a lot of that, and they get through the recording of the album, although again, Thijs and Jan are never in the same place at the same time. Jan does contribute material to it, but they're never in. But they're never actually in the studio at the same time. And I think the title track, it plods a little bit. It's got some really, really good themes, and there's a lot of people that love that album more than I do. I think side one, the shorter songs, is good focus because they're focused.
They're focused. Yeah.
Side two is just a bit. It's just a bit. I think if Pierre had been playing on it, it might have been a little bit more varied and lively. As it is, it just kind of it's got some really good themes, but I think it takes its time. It could really have been 10 minutes shorter. But that's just me. That's just me. For a lot of rock fans, they like that period, and then they go off and touring that, which is fine. Thijs and Jan are different areas of the stage, but and Thijs is playing with a much greater palette of keyboards rather than he's pretty much an organist up to this point, but he's playing with synthesizers and a mellotron and things like that, like the Rick Wakeman's and Tony Bankses of this world. So they tour Hamburg Concerto, and then which is kind of okay. But then Jan doesn't want to play with Colin Allen anymore. They get another, so they bring in so we then go to a situation where they have three drummers in the same year. I think that would be 1975. I think Pierre returns a little bit. They record a little bit more. Pierre wants the other drummer taken off the things he's recording, but they won't do that. Pierre leaves again. They fire Colin and bring in an American drummer called David Kemper, who's really good, much, but he's kind of there as more of a session guy, really. And then they record the final album with what you might consider to be the classic Focus lineup, which is Mother Focus, which is recorded. You have to say that very fast, and you understand why they called it that.
Yeah.
They record this album called Mother Focus in the USA. And bizarrely, I really like it. Yeah. But I think I'm the only one.
Okay.
Well, it's got some focusy bits, but it's got this kind of American, kind of almost easy listening sheen on it. That kind of works. It kind of taps into a different part of my brain, I think, than the classic focus stuff. But I actually really like it. It's just you can hear that Jan's not really committed to it, and his guitar is it's quite low in the mix, and he's using talkbox, like Peter Frampton. He's in the talkbox thing a lot. He comes obsessed with the talkbox as well, and for traditional Focus fans, it doesn't work.
That was 75.
But I like it. I think it's a good album, but it's not a great Focus album, if that makes sense. Some people say, well, what will happen if it was remixed? There are some early mixes available, again, on the Focus 50 box set, and they don't really add anything. I think, you could really have a go at remixing it and produce something that's a bit more like the classic Focus sound. But no one will ever do that, I'm sure. I don't think it made enough of a dent in people's hearts to really for it. Can you make a dent in someone's hearts? Anyway, it doesn't
tugged at their strings.
Bigger enough, really. It does okay in Holland, but the whole thing's a bit of a damp squib, really. As I say, I really like it, and it's still out there. You can still buy it. It's still if you buy a Focus box set, it'll be as part of the Focus box set. So
part of their 50 years anthology set.
Yeah. So and you can buy it individually as well if you want to. Yeah, I like it, but most people think it's not really Focus.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. By 79, they dissolved, right? That the decline more about musical differences or personality clashes, or maybe a mix of both.
There is a little bit of a story there. Mother Focus exists because Bert Reuter, who I was going to come on and talk about, the bass player, he saves them, because what happens is by that time, Jan and Thijs are starting to develop solo careers. Thijs has already had loads of success with a series of albums called Introspection, which were basically classical albums with his flute playing. Jan is looking to develop a solo career as well. They both save most of their material for the solo careers, which means someone's has to step in and write some stuff, and that's Bert. So Bert comes in and writes most of the material. But after that, they don't. There is some touring in '75, but they don't play anything from Mother Focus, or very little from Mother Focus. And then in there is a further twist to the tale, because in early '76 they're meant to go back into rehearsal. There is some material, but there was a final major argument between Jan and Thijs, and Jan leaves. This is early '76. Amazing! It's amazing it lasted as long as that.
I was going to say, yeah, they really they made that last as long as I think anybody could possibly do under those conditions.
It's amazing that they lasted that long, particularly considering things hadn't been that great since '72, really.
Right.
So Jan leaves. But they've got a UK tour booked. So which no one wants to cancel. So they had to find a guitarist really quickly. So they bring in this guy called Philip Catherine, who's Belgian, and he's a jazz guitarist. And they cobble together a set of the hits and some new material. But Philip Catherine he's a really good, and again, he's an amazing player, and he contributed one really good track to Focus, which is called Sneezing Bull. But he's not Jan Akkerman. He doesn't have the attack of Jan Akkerman. He's very much a sort of a jazz player. So the tour goes okay. There is a live record of it, which again is available, and it's okay. But again, it's not Focus. And then after that, Focus go into a bit of a holding pattern of the gigs get fewer and fewer. They play some festivals. They have some musicians on rotation. They have a drummer who comes in and plays occasionally when they need him. So they bring in another guitarist called Yves Albers, who's Dutch, and he becomes part of the band. And eventually they do one final album. This is in 1978. And this is the notorious Focus Comprobi. So whose idea this was, I do not know. And what they were thinking, nobody can quite understand. They decided to bring in a lead singer who's PJ Proby, who is an American, well, some would say Elvis impersonator, very strong. He comes in and does his best with some songs that don't really suit him. A couple of them are okay. So this becomes Focus Comprobi, which is a really strange album. It's got some quite hardcore sort of jazz fusion tracks, some instrumental tracks, which are pretty good. And the PJ Proby tracks are just almost unlistenable, really. Through no fault of Proby's, he just does his thing. Apparently he was drinking a lot of the time, so he had to be watered in the studio,
yes,
shall we say. But it's a very, very odd album, and I don't know, and whoever's idea it was, I can understand that let's try something different, but it doesn't really work. So they have the American drummer Steve Smith playing on it as well, who was in Journey, I think.
Oh yeah, Steve Smith. Oh wow. Okay.
But he's amazing on it. You know, he's proper,
he's a great drummer,
proper fusion drumming. Yeah. But Philip Catherine plays on a couple of tracks. Eve albums plays on a few. Thijs is on it as well. Obviously, Bert plays on it, but it just doesn't really work. And yes, and like 2 or 3 of the PJ Proby songs are
Wow, here it is. Yes, Steve Smith drums. Oh, I didn't even catch that. Yeah, didn't even chart.
I bought it on vinyl at the time because I was still a Focus fan. So I bought Mother Focus, and which I liked, and then I bought Focus. So it must have had reasonable distribution because I must have gone into a record store and bought it because that's the only way you could buy stuff in 1978. So I must have bought it, and I remember thinking, "What is this?"
Now, is this before or after Steve Smith was in Journey? When was Steve Smith?
Before it must have been. Was it before? Because it's 78. It was
Okay.
released. He declined to become a he did the album, but he declined to become a member of the band for completely understandable reasons. Who would want to be really, because the Focus weren't gigging very much anyway. So PJ Proby didn't do any performances, so they were just playing instrumental sets.
I'm curious now just to listen to it to hear him on drums. And just from what you're telling me, you got my curiosity.
It's his drumming. If you listen to his drumming on, particularly on instrumental pieces, there's a track called Maximum. I forget the names of some of the other instrumental pieces, but he's really good. He's really good. And if he'd have stayed in they would have been a different. They would have been a different band, I'm sure. And that's kind of it.
That's it. But until 85, self-titled album. Now on paper, Reunion sounds exciting for fans, but it didn't stick for Akkerman and Van Leer. And you write the album marks the end of any sort of creative collaboration between our two heroes, save for a few live performances of the hits. What went wrong? Same problems as before?
It was a bad idea. It was one of those things. It was a management thing. Somebody's management. I forget who said, "Shall we get these two guys together?" Because so they both been doing their own thing in the early 80s. Obviously, the early 80s was not a good time for prog musicians, generally speaking. So they had both. Thijs has been had formed a different band. Jan was doing solo stuff, very, very successfully towards the end of the 70s, but less successfully in the early 80s. So someone said, well, let's bring them back together again. Let's recreate the old Focus sound. But it just didn't. I mean, the album's not great. There's good stuff on there, but it's kind of buried in some very 80s stylizations, a lot of Lynn drums. And some of the playing's very good, but again, it's very much of its time. And you have to fight through a lot of quite dull music to get to the really good bits. And it took a long time to pull together as well. It really did take a long time to
for the same reasons as before, right? They just
kind of. Well, again, they were never in the same studio together. They were just, they were. I don't think anyway. They were just recording their parts separately, and as I say, some of it works, and most of it doesn't really. Again, it must have had reasonable distribution because I went out and bought it when it came out in the UK. Mad fool that I am. And I've got it on CD since as well. So as I say, it has some. There's very little that makes you think, "Oh, this is as good as Focus 2. Oh, this is as good as Sylvia." It's just a little lackluster. So the only thing they do together after that really is there's a few in the early 90s. They're invited to do a couple of festival appearances where they just do 20 minutes of Sylvia and Hocus Pocus and stuff, and that's fine, but that's it really. They've not I read an interview with Jan where he sort of said people always ask them, would you ever get back together again? And Jan always says no, don't mention the war, he says. Ha 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 ha. There's too much bad blood, too much water under the bridge now really, so it's they'll never play together. Meanwhile, Thijs, I mean, they're both in their late 70s. Thijs still tours with Focus, his version of Focus, which has Pierre playing drums. Pierre is a monster. He's 80 years old, 79 or 80, and he can still play like an absolute demon. It's amazing to see. Wow. Actually,
it is.
Thijs is a little bit unsteady on his feet now, but again, the musicianship has never waned. They tour the UK. They tour the UK and Europe. I don't think they haven't played in the USA very much. The odd festival appearance, I think, but they still tour the UK. They're touring the UK either now or very soon.
Okay.
And I've seen them relatively recently, and you get with different guitarist, who's really good. Very tasteful guitarist. They're still releasing albums as Focus, but it's not. You have to draw a line, almost draw a line at the end of. Really, you draw a line. There's plenty of lines you can draw. You can draw a line in 1976 when Jan left. You can probably draw a line in 1979 when they split up. You can draw. I've extended a dotted line to 1985 when this is half-hearted attempt at a reconciliation, but that's it really. So you either draw. That's where I've drawn the line. But you could very easily do. So Focus didn't exist apart from the Odd Festival thing, didn't exist from 1979 until 2002, when the Thijs version started touring again, and they've released, forgotten how many albums, several albums since that are of a good standard as well, but they're not Focus. They're not the Focus we once knew. I've got them all. But,
right up through 2024's Focus 12.
Focus 12. Well, there you go. 12 albums. And to be fair to the band, I think when they reformed in 2002, they weren't quite sure what the interest was. But now they've built up into, and I remember seeing them in a small club playing in front of 100 people, a couple of times actually, round about that time. And now they can play a tour playing small theatres, big clubs, small theatres, and they sell out. So they've re-established themselves. The set is quite packed with the old stuff, as you'd expect. There's still quite a bit of improvisation, and there's a lot of drum solos.
Why do you think it is that they were able to get that audience back? Just constant touring, getting out there and.
Yeah, I think so. I think they just said, "Hey, we're still here. We still tour." I've just retired from running the festival, Summer's End Festival. I retired from it last year, but they played my festival in 2012, and they were great. There's still a very high level of musicianship. So, and I think that's happened to a lot of bands. You get yourself back onto the circuit again, and there's a gradual increase in interest. If you just don't go away, then I think sometimes you can kind of re-establish interest. Same thing kind of happened to Yes. Again, they went through a period where they, either didn't exist, and when they came back, it was a kind of tentative thing, and then gradually you build up your live audience again.
Yeah.
So everyone would love to see Jan come back. He's still playing and touring as well, doing his own thing. In fact, he's been doing a Focus thing recently.
Okay.
Quite, perhaps for commercial, he's been doing a thing which he calls My Focus, where he plays Focus songs. He's always played a few in the live set, but he's normally done more of his sort of jazz stuff.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. Focus 1969 to 1985. Out now?
It's out in the UK. When I last checked, it's still on a boat, so it'll be out in the USA hopefully within 4 weeks.
Okay.
So it's very soon. It's, as I say, it's out. It's been out in the UK for a couple of months.
Great. And that's burningshed.com is where you can get a copy.
The best place to get it that most benefits. Well, I was going to say the author, but that's me, isn't it?
It's you.
Most benefits the company and the author is to buy it from our shop at Burning Shed. But Amazon, wherever you buy your books, you can buy it from.
And people can find you online where, Stephen?
sonicbondpublishing.com.
sonicbondpublishing.com. Stephen Lambe, thank you so much. We've been on a roll with the Sonic Bond books. We had Richard James on recently for the Rush book. We've got Chris Sutton coming on soon for his Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio book, which I'm looking forward to.
We've got some stuff coming up that you're going to like. We've got a book on Springsteen.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that, and I'm a huge Springsteen fan. So,
yeah. I thought you were. So
yeah.
So we've got some stuff that will interest you, I think, coming up. So
Great.
Thanks for your support, as ever.
Oh,
Both
thank
for
you.
my books and for the company generally. So,
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much, and we hope to talk to you again down the road.
thanks, Eric. See ya.
That's it. It's in the books.